And a very good afternoon. I'm Dave Adams, TJN, the Jesus Network. It's time to change the planet. And one of the ways we can change the planet is to stand up for our faith. Now, it's very easy to say we're going to do that, and very easy when we're inspired and singing praises in church and reading the Bible and saying, you know, next time I'm confronted and have to defend my Christianity, I'll do that. But it's another thing to do that when you're a college, university student, or high school student, and you're faced by your instructor, and you have the possibility, and this has happened, we've run into students here in Oregon that have run into this challenge, where it could be a severe ding on their grade point average to stand up for their faith because their instructor is threatening to degrade their grade or fail their project or fail their argument because they're taking a stand against abortion or against same-sex marriage. And we've run into students here in Oregon and elsewhere across the country that have been belittled, humiliated in front of the class for being closed-minded. If you were really someone who wants to love everyone, then you should embrace their lifestyle. You should get on board with modern society and realize that some people are just born that way. When you know that the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin in the eyes of the Lord. And so you want to take a stand for that. So how do you do that? How exactly do you share the truth in love, but not do it by reacting? How do you respond in love and not react? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We have a pre-recorded interview with David French. Now, David is with the American Center for Law and Justice, and they've been involved in a number of cases across the country. They're also involved with SaveSaeed.org, the Boise, Idaho pastor who is imprisoned in the Middle East that they're trying to get released. We'll talk a little bit about that in the interview to come. We should note that this interview is 47 minutes long, so we're not going to have a chance to play all of it in its entirety during our live show. But later on tonight, when we prepare this and prepare it for replay on demand, you'll be able to hear the entire interview that we had with David French. So we'll start that interview in just a moment. Our thanks once again to Rainbow West Christian Bookstore and Connie for allowing us to come here every Monday. We do have a chair here, so if we're ever doing our chair here and like today we don't have a guest, or even if we do, and you want to come in and share a testimony of what God has done in your life, then we're more than happy to hear your testimony and share it with others online. As I was walking through the store, I saw this and I just had to share it with you. It's Be Strong and Courageous, Joshua 1:7. As you can see it there, it's a horse, very strong, beautiful horse, very muscled. Be strong and very courageous as you share your faith. And I just wanted to share that with you because there are times that we need to be strong and very courageous. And this is on sale now for $32 here at Rainbow West. So, you know, and there's lots of plaques around here that if you need something to hang up in your room or whatever to remind you to be very strong and courageous, there's something for you. You know, sometimes just sharing your testimony, you can do it by just having things that are very Christian oriented. I was just noticing a coffee container here that looks like the Starbucks logo, but it says Saved by Christ. And so sometimes you can just put that on your desk and it says Saved by Christ. Something about the living waters. Oh, it's this other one. I believe. So you can put this on your desk. I believe. Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them. And this is $8.99 for this coffee container. Or the Saved by Christ Starbucks-like logo is $9.99. So sometimes that's the way we can share our faith. Just something to think about. One of the books we want to talk about today is Max Lucado, his latest book, which came out early the month of March 2013, early this month. It's called Second Chances, More Stories of Grace. And the preface, are you more prodigal than prince, more stumbler than saint, more faltering than faithful? You wish you could just turn back the clock, make one different decision, or start all over again. Do you think we all wish we could do that sometimes? If you're drowning in regret, shamed by your mistakes, or unable to offer grace to the one who's wronged you, you're holding the right book in your hands. You'll likely see a familiar face in these stories, possibly your own. Selected from Max Licado's most beloved books, this collection of stories reminds you that there's forgiveness for past mistakes, hope for your future. They are a witness to God's specialty, which of course is second chances. That's the name of the book, Second Chances by Max Licado, and it's $19.99 here at Rainbow West Christian Books in Albany, Oregon. So that is the book that we're showcasing today. Coming up here in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking to David French. Now, David is a spokesman for the American Center for Law and Justice. You can find their website just do a Google search for ACLJ or American Center for Law and Justice. Feel free to call them if you have a question about how you were treated as a Christian student on campus. Maybe if you want to talk to them for prayer or just advice on how to proceed in your situation. Go ahead and give them a call. But I think a lot of your questions will be answered by this upcoming interview. We thank David for talking to us for the length he did. Again, you won't hear the entire interview during this live webcast, but we will have the entire interview up later tonight on our website, thejesusnetwork.net. So here we go with the interview with David French. And God bless. Hope you enjoy the interview and hope you find it informative and maybe give you some, what should we want to, I don't want to call it ammunition, but maybe some things to help you respond instead of react. So here's the interview with David. Hi, I'm Dave, TJN, the Jesus Network. It is time to change the planet. And if you go to our website, thejesusnetwork.net, we've started an outreach that we've been kind of working on for a while. It's called Campus Watch. One of the reasons God's put this in our heart is sometimes when we go into a public setting, when we talk to a group of people, and we mention stories of Christian students, and it can be the non-traditional age of a Christian student. They go on a college or university campus, and they're discriminated against, they're ridiculed, and they're told that they're stupid, and they're closed-minded, and they need to be more open-minded and more loving of gays, lesbians, and they need to be more open about things like abortion. Even though the U.S. Constitution guarantees our right to practice our religion. And this is coming from staff and faculty. Now, we're not trying to insinuate this happens every day with every single student, but it is happening, in our experience, an alarming rate, because every time we go into a public setting and we start talking about our Campus Watch outreach, there's always at least one student, if not two, that comes up with a story about how they were flunked for a class, how they were failed at a grade, how well, there was one student, for example, that came to us about an arguments class, and they wanted to argue against abortion, because you would think that let's find a good argument and present both sides or a compelling argument about this controversial question. And this Christian student was told that topic is too controversial to talk about in an arguments class. And the student's response was, well, I thought that was the basis or the reason for an arguments class. No answer from the faculty. We're just very concerned about what we're seeing. And to that end, we have David French on the phone line right now with us with the American Center for Law and Justice. David, I've been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So what are we seeing generally on campuses across America? Are we seeing some discrimination? Is it increasing?
We're seeing an incredible rate of discrimination, actually, and we've been seeing it for a very long time. It's hard to tell if it's increasing. It's certainly not decreasing. And what we're actually seeing is in some ways, a dangerous new turn of a very old problem, of a more than decade-old problem. We're seeing that universities are showing increased enthusiasm for ejecting Christian student groups off campus entirely, not just suppressing individual student speech, but kicking Christian student groups off campus entirely. In other words, InterVarsity Christian Fellowships, Campus Crusade for Christ, and organizations like that. There was just a recent incident at Rollins College where a university official, an RA, literally broke up a Bible study in a common area. 4 students were just sitting there studying the Bible in a common area, and the RA made them stop. I mean, utterly absurd. I mean, that's behavior reminiscent of a totalitarian regime, not a place that's supposed to be a home for debate and free inquiry.
That's what I thought. So what reason are they giving these students?
Well, you've got to love this one. So the argument that is used against these students is that there is that a student group that reserves its leadership for Christians is discriminating, get this, on the basis of religion and shouldn't be allowed on campus. I mean, this is Orwellian. I mean, imagine your own home church. You're a pastor at your own home church, and you're running a pastor search in your own home church, and you're a Baptist church. You have a right to say, hey, we want a Baptist to lead our Baptist church. Well, these universities are saying, no, actually, you don't have a right. You must give an equal chance to a Hindu, an atheist, a Muslim. It's absolutely absurd, and it's a legal doctrine that would never, ever fly off campus. But these universities are very proficient at finding a way to create special rules only applicable on the university campus and imposing them to defeat religious liberty.
Well, I'm really thankful that organizations like ACLJ are wanting to stand up and take note of this, because one of the things that we've told the students is we are going to report these stories. One of the things that is happening, I think, is that, especially in the smaller schools, some of these groups are feeling very surrounded, if you will, by the enemy, and they're getting kind of timid in what they're trying to do and feel like everybody at the college campuses is against them. What we remind them is it's the U.S. Constitution guarantees that you have the right to freely express your religion and to freely practice your religion, and to not follow that law is a violation of the U.S. Constitution. And the message that we're sending out, even now on this broadcast, this webcast, is that if you are, especially in Oregon, but if you are experiencing this kind of discrimination, especially from faculty or staff, we want to know about it, because we will report the story. And if the student wants to take it to that degree, we will put them in touch with attorneys in the Portland area that are willing to take on the case free of charge to protect your right to practice your religion on campus. Now, we're not trying to cause a fight on any of these college campuses or universities, but we want to send a very strong message to them that this is their constitutional guarantee, and you will not tread on this. You must allow them the right to express their religion. And the students that we've talked to have said that they're very appreciative of the fact that somebody's willing to stand behind them and stand for what they believe in and willing to tell their story, because the students we talk to feel kind of like they're alone. And the message we want to send out loud and clear is that you're not alone. If you're undergoing this kind of discrimination, there are people like ACLJ, there are people like the Jesus Network, there are people like these attorneys in Portland that will stand up for your rights, and you don't have to roll over and play dead.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, nobody has to roll over and play dead. And you're also right that students so often feel alone and intimidated. You know, I went to a Christian college, but then I went to law school at Harvard Law School, which is not exactly Christian.
No, it's
not. And I can remember there were times when it gets a little bit intimidating when you're around some of the most intelligent people you've ever met in your life, and they not only think that you're wrong, they think you're hateful and you're bigoted. And what's unfortunate, and this is really a thing that we're missing as we prepare students for college, we tend to think of college as an intellectual challenge. There's one where, well, you better be prepared to make an intellectual defense of your faith. And all that's true. I mean, we certainly need to be ready to make an intellectual defense of our faith in a classroom to be able to engage the world of ideas. But truth be told, most of what happens on campus is not attacking a Christian's ideas. It's about stigmatizing, demonizing Christians as racist, sexist, homophobic, discriminators. And so it's not an argument, it's an attack. And we don't prepare our kids well enough for that. There's an old saying, and I've heard Ravi Zacharias, the great Christian apologist, say this several times, that when it comes to the battle of ideas, stigma will defeat dogma. And stigma, in other words, the attack on another person not based on reason or ideas, but just an attempt to condescend, to belittle, to insult, beats dogma, a set of beliefs. Because we know how to defend our beliefs, but we often don't know how to defend our character. And that's what is being attacked with Christian college students today.
One of the things that we're probably telling, and I know that some parents are doing this because I think they're trying to be good Christian parents, but the phrase "turn the other cheek" is often told to Christian students. And the problem I have with that is this. When our young people go to college, statistics show that about 80% of them turn away from their faith. So we're essentially throwing them to the lions and not standing up for them and not helping them, especially this time in their life when they're trying to spread their wings a little bit and trying to learn how to formulate their ideas. To throw them in the lion's den like this and not give them some kind of support or backup, it just is not a good way to mentor these young people.
Well, that's right. And let's not forget that when the Apostle Paul was being oppressed, he asserted his rights as a Roman citizen and began a court process during which he wrote most of the New Testament, most of the epistles, his epistles in the New Testament, and it took him all the way to Rome. So there's ample biblical precedent for asserting your rights as a citizen. And let's even add the following to that. In the United States of America, this is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And so each one of us, we are representatives of the true power structure, the true authorities and ruling authorities in this country. And our law and Constitution specifically delegates to the people the right to enforce the law and the Constitution through the civil litigation system. So there's every ability of ours to fulfill our responsibilities as citizens to stop injustice. What does the Lord require of you, man, but to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. So seeking justice is a primary command and priority of the Christian citizen. And when we do not stop this persecution, when the law protects us, we are enabling the injustice committed, and not just on ourselves, but on the others that follow us.
David, what advice would you give to people who come at some students with the comment, well, just turn the other cheek?
Well, there's a difference between not taking a personal insult. In other words, turning the other cheek is not taking offense, being patient, keeping no record of personal wrongs against you. There's a difference between an insult and a violation of your rights. An insult is not a violation of your rights, and we should be patient and long-suffering in the face of personal attacks, just as Christ was. But the violation of our core constitutional rights, the things that prevent us from spreading the gospel by silencing us, we can't tolerate that, no more than the apostles tolerated that. They directly defied Roman authorities when told to keep quiet. And so much of what we see on college campus is not just the insults intimidate people out of their beliefs, but the actual laws and policies that these universities impose work to silence Christianity unlawfully, and that has to be resisted. So we respond in love to our persecutors, but at the same time, we don't let the gospel be silenced.
That's a good point, because one of the things that can happen is if we can allow this to continue to happen is the gospel will be silenced, and it will be silenced simply because they've pushed us down and we've stayed down. We are to share the truth in love, but we're to share the truth and not just sit down and be quiet. We have to share the gospel. Jesus Christ said, go and share the gospel with the planet. Go and make disciples of all nations. So by virtue, if you really embrace the gospel and embrace the Great Commission, you simply can't be quiet. And that's what the apostles did, and that's what we're called to do as Christians.
Well, one thing I fear that has happened is that our students who, when you're 18 to 22 years old and you're going to college, you're often thinking, well, I'm going to start a period of my life that's going to be the time of my life, that it's going to be some of the best and most enjoyable times of life. And frankly, college these days is sort of like an incredibly expensive Disneyland. There's less need to study. The time to study has decreased by about 60% over the last 30 years. The time for partying has increased about twice to threefold. And you're going to make friends. You're going to make friends that last a lifetime. You're going to have a great time, and you're getting to get a degree. And we're just not prepared to go to college and be attacked so relentlessly. And so students understandably get to college and they're bewildered, they're upset, they don't know exactly how to respond, but we have to respond with love and with courage. And unfortunately, a lot of students take that to mean, well, the only way for me to get through this is to be the kind of Christian everyone else wants me to be. And the kind of Christian they demand that you be in college is you have to be the nicest person in the room, or they don't accept your Christianity. In other words, you have to always provide a nice, warm, compassionate answer no matter the circumstance. And sometimes the circumstance cries out for a call to righteousness, a call to justice. And yet our Christian students often absorb within themselves such an overwhelming demand to be nice in all circumstances that they forget the need to proclaim truth, to proclaim justice, and to evidence God's righteousness at work within their lives and their hearts. So, we can't allow our Christian students to be silenced not just by the formal policies of these colleges, but also by the incredible peer pressure, which, fact of the matter is probably the primary source right now. The primary source of censorship is the self-censorship that students undergo rather than confront their peers, rather than be out of step with their peers.
So, David,
and that's the most difficult to combat.
David, let's give some students some tips on how they can deal with this. So, for example, let's say we have a situation, and I've heard it several times, is that a student is given an essay or an argument or whatever against abortion, or especially same-sex marriage here in Oregon, and there's a battle going on in that in every state of the nation right now. And and a lot of times publicly in front of the class, the instructor says, well, you're one of those, or you really need to come to the party and you really need to open up and embrace other philosophies and other ways of thinking, and you need to quit being closed-minded and so dogmatic. You need to be more open. And some of these attacks or some of these criticisms by faculty in front of the class are pretty open and pretty much against the Christian religion. So if a student has that, let's say it's an argument against same-sex marriage, and they're wanting to do an essay or they're wanting to take a stand against it, and the instructor basically comes down and says, I'm not going to accept your argument because it's based on you being closed-minded, and you're here at college to be open-minded. How does a student respond?
Well, there's a couple of ways. Now, I've been through situations similar when I was in law school. I once had a teacher get so upset in my argument against her on abortion that she literally started shrieking and shouting at me, which was an eye-opening experience. Well, the number one rule is you need to be respectful. At all times, you're not going to respond with the same level of insults or scorn that the other side does, but you can be firm even as you're respectful. I would suggest that responding by noting that not everyone, that for example, the teacher might need to be exposed to some different ideas as well, that other people in the class might need to be exposed to minority viewpoints on the college campus, that in fact, the college campus should be a place where dissenting views from the majority are welcomed and celebrated, not shunned and despised. That's what academic freedom is all about. And then if a professor takes actual action against you on the basis of your political ideology, number one, the best course of action is not to go running immediately to a lawyer. It's to go, for example, to a department chair to take advantage of the procedures that exist within the campus, because when it comes to, for example, grading disputes, you're never going to win a grade dispute in a court of law.
That was my next question.
Unless somebody literally writes on a piece of paper, I don't give Christians A's, or something like that, no court in America is going to want to hear a dispute over a grade. Again, it has to be an incredible exception. We had one when I worked at Alliance Defense Fund many years ago, where a teacher wrote on a paper of a Christian student, ask God what your grade is. In other words, he literally refused to grade the paper because of the student's point of view. Well, that was an easy case because it was there in writing. But 95% of grade disputes are the professor has left themselves some wiggle room. So go to your department chair, use the academic measures available within the school, but never, ever allow a teacher to make you believe that your Christian views are somehow illegitimate within the academy. In fact, use the language of the academy back at them. Talk about how I thought this was a place that celebrated academic freedom, that respected those who would speak truth to power, to those who would disagree with the majority ideology. I did not know that the academy was a place that enforced conformity and rigidity and suppressed independent thought. When you turn it around on them like that, it is very difficult for them to respond with anything other than name-calling at that point, because the last refuge of the professor or the administrator or the fellow student who is losing an argument is to say something along the lines, well, if we let you speak, we're going to have to let KKK speak. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. At which point, it's quite easy to parry that with a laugh and a scornful notation and even a little bit of a outrage, at being offended that you would dare compare someone who's trying to spread the love of Christ to those who are actual domestic terrorists. It's a stunning and ridiculous comparison, but people in the academy make it all the time.
Another argument that a lot of Christian students are faced with is the student, if they want to take it to this level, say, okay, does your faith hold to the fact or hold to the belief that Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven? Do you believe that you as a Christian accepting Jesus Christ is the only way to get to heaven? And they're using that as an example of a Christian being closed-minded because the Christian faith says we're the only way. And by doing that, then you're demonstrating to us, the faculty, that you are closed-minded, and that's why we're saying this. That's happened on many occasions.
Oh, sure. Well, every single person alive believes some things are true and some things are false. I've never met a single person ever that truly believes that some things were true, some things were false, even if they claim to be moral relativists. They were still claiming that moral relativism was true and moral absolutism was false, which begins to get you into a bit of a logic loop.
Yeah.
So when you begin to drill down and you say, look, we all have our beliefs about things that are true, that are false, I'm very curious as to what level of expertise and education you've obtained to allow you to disprove and to believe that my belief in the legitimacy of the Bible and God's Word is false. The vast majority of people who, with great conviction, declare the Bible to be false and wrong, haven't actually read it, haven't actually studied it, don't know anything about Christian theology. They just kind of parrot what they've heard from others. When you begin to actually drill down and try to ask the basis for someone's confidence in their belief, you'll often find that there isn't much of a basis for it there at all. It's, in fact, a faith-based belief. They don't have any knowledge that necessarily contradicts the Word of God. They just have beliefs that contradict the Word of God, and that is problematic. That's a faith-based worldview. You have a faith-based worldview. Let's talk about our respective faith-based worldviews. And again and again, I've had conversations like that, but they won't go right down that primrose path for you. They're not going to walk right into your trap, but what you will do is you'll begin to walk out of their trap, and that's the key.
So let's say we go to a department head, and you go to a department head, and let's say for sake of discussion that the department head agrees with the teacher, that Christians are closed-minded, so on and so forth, and they simply want to do away with all the Christians. So let's say, for the sake of this discussion, that the Christian student goes to the department head and gets the door essentially slammed in their face. What do they do next?
Well, almost every school has a provost, which is the chief academic officer of a university. Department heads aren't the final word. But again, let's be very clear about when we're appealing up the chain of command at a college. We're not doing it when someone's been mean to us. We don't have a right for people to be nice to us. We're not doing it when we think we deserved a better grade, but we don't have any evidence to prove that we deserved a better grade. We're not going to be a bunch of whiners. We have to have some thick skin, and we have to be able to take negative comments. If someone makes a negative comment to you, don't just go running to the department head. Have a little bit of a thick skin, defend yourself, take your class, and go on. But if there's evidence that there has been discrimination against you, such as written evidence, blatantly discriminatory comments in class, not just comments against Christianity, but comments against you as a Christian, document them, take them to the department head. If the department head doesn't give satisfaction, again, when you have legitimate claims, and we're talking primarily about grades, for example, here, then you go up. There's going to be an appeal process that about every college has for grade disputes. Educate yourself about that. Use that. Now, if someone is telling you you cannot speak, that is different from saying, I didn't like your paper, I'm going to give you a B. If someone says you can't organize a club on campus, you can't bring a pro-life display to campus, and you see other people organizing clubs, and you see other people bringing displays to campus that advance their point of view, well, then that becomes a legal issue. Not as much an academic issue. That becomes a legal issue because you're talking about real censorship. That's when you're going to want to contact a lawyer. The instant someone tells you you cannot say that, that's when you begin to get a legal issue. If someone says to you, your paper was bad, 99 times out of 100, that's not a legal issue.
If they say in class, we're not going to listen to your viewpoint, sit down and shut up, you're one of those. And what's
probably not a legal issue.
Probably
not a legal issue.
Probably time for thick skin.
That's time for thick skin, and also to maybe, if you can document it, take it to the department chair and say, I was told as a Christian, could you imagine what would happen if someone said we don't want to hear from African Americans in this class, or we don't want to hear from gays in this class? You would see that there would be a real problem. And often, you'll be surprised how often even liberal administrators, if you have the right documentation, don't want a problem related to discrimination against Christians. Not because they have particular affection for you, they just don't want to deal with the hassle. So if it's documented, if you've written down what they've said, if you have another student who's willing to serve as a witness, 9 times out of 10, that kind of thing will get taken care of quickly.
What about voice recording in classes?
Only do that in accordance to college rules.
So if they have one of the little handheld...
Some states won't allow it. Some states flat out won't allow it. Some professors won't allow it in their class. Don't break college rules to record a class.
So make sure that we've had some students that have done that and have gotten into trouble. So not at our request, but they've just decided upon themselves to record a conversation and got into trouble because it violated policy. Right.
You got to, unless the rule is unconstitutional, you got to comply with the rules. And when I was in college, we had a professor who had some very famous clients and was a guy who was a newsmaker. He was always in the news, and he said, I want you to know everything in this class is off the record. If you take anything that I say to the media, we're going to have an issue. Now, if he had done something illegal and I'd taken it to the media, there wouldn't have been an issue. But say, if I didn't like one of his comments and had taken it to the media, I had an opportunity to drop that class when he said, hey, this is off the record, and I didn't drop that class. So, we want to be fair to the other side. We're not ambushing people. What we're doing is making sure that they are treating others fairly. But sometimes we just have to have a thick skin. I get there's a lot of complaints that we get that are very legitimate, where a person is told not to speak, where they're not allowed to organize a club, where they're not allowed to do any number of things that other groups are allowed to do, and we are very enthusiastic about upholding the law. Then there's some other people who contact us, and frankly, they're just offended. Somebody said something they didn't like, they were insulted, they felt humiliated. Well, the Constitution doesn't protect you from that. You don't have any legal protection from having your feelings hurt. That's when I was talking about how we have to get young people to realize they have to have a thick skin. They have to be ready for the stigma. The stigma is not a federal case. Censorship is a federal case.
Good point. Let's say there's a college or university that creates and I'm sure you've heard this one, an area. You can only talk about Christianity in this free speak zone or in this specific area, and you can't.
That's very common. And what they usually do is, rarely will they say you can only talk about Christianity. They'll just say you can't hand out flyers, you can't speak about anything outside the free speech zone. And most free speech zones are unconstitutional. If you look at the case law around the country, very rarely will a free speech zone be held to be constitutional at a public campus, especially a public campus with big outdoor spaces. Because outdoor spaces and public parks are traditional public forums. And so it's very difficult to have a binding speech restriction in a traditional public forum. And so we have had a lot of success over the years challenging free speech zones, because those zones are an artificial restriction and limitation on a traditional public forum for speech. And colleges, I remember one of my favorites is a university in Texas that didn't have a free speech zone, it had a free speech gazebo. So if you imagine this, if all the 20,000 plus students wanted to exercise their free speech rights on campus at one time, they'd have to be packed into superhuman density on that small gazebo to speak. I mean, it was absurd. A court saw that it was absurd, and it was overturned.
Let's take an example of the free speech zone. A lot of the colleges and universities, especially, let's talk about starting a Christian club, and we've looked at getting involved with students to start a Christian club. One of the requirements is that it must be started by a student on the campus, and that's a given. I understand that. But let's say you have one of the problems you have young people that already feel like they're very much by themselves and very much in the minority. And in this age group of young person, that's not a place that they like to be, because they're trying to learn how to get along in the world. And especially when they're putting themselves on the line to enforce something like a free speech zone. And they've got also the financial considerations. I've got a lot of money riding on this. I can't afford to fail this class. And I think sometimes that's a leverage that's used to try to keep them quiet.
Well, yes, but my message to Christian students is pretty clear in those regards. Cowboy up. It's time to grow up a little bit. I went to one of the things I do in my career is I'm also a JAG officer in the Army Reserve. I served in Iraq in 07, 08. And I saw people who were exactly the age of some of our college students laying down their lives, sometimes giving their lives, sometimes being horribly injured for the rest of their lives to defend liberties that some of our Christian college students are afraid to exercise lest they not get into a sorority or lest they not get the grade they want or the law school recommendation they want. And that kind of fear and timidity is not godly. Period. End of discussion. God did not give us a spirit of fear. And frankly, it makes me a little bit upset when I have Christian college students come to me just panicked over the idea of forming a Christian club. It's, come on, guys. Nobody's going to kill you. Nobody's going to shoot at you. Yeah, there might be some consequences, but you know what? You've got lawyers ready, willing, and able to help you all around the country if you just show a little bit of gumption and a little bit of nerve and do the right thing. So, yes, I have some sympathy that people are under social pressure, but also people need to wake up, smell the coffee, get a little bit of a backbone, and do something. I mean, right now we are working on a case here at ACLJ with an American pastor from Boise, Idaho, who is in prison and being physically abused in Iran for his faith. Saeed Abedini.
Right.
And when I think about what courage he showed to go to Iran with a Revolutionary Guard watching him to build an orphanage for the most least advantaged and most vulnerable people in the Iranian society as an American Christian, that's courage. My goodness. So our college students need to wake up a little bit, get over themselves a little bit, and decide that they're going to show just maybe 1/1,000,000th of the courage of a Saeed Abedini. And, you know, those of us, and I resolved after I got back from Iraq, I'm not going to baby these students anymore. I'll have sympathy and understand that it's hard socially within their frame of reference, but we can't baby these students. We have to train them to get ready to confront the world, not as timid, scared Christians who want everything to be just golden and paved for them with golden paved stones before they share the gospel, but as bold Christians who can show some courage and some conviction, because that's what wins the world, is courage and conviction, not fear and timidity.
I understand. There's so much, I think, in the Bible when you talk about it, and I don't want to speak against anybody's preaching, but there has been a prosperity gospel, and the fact that if things are rough, then you must not be doing God's will. Well, sometimes you can be doing God's will, and it's going to get very rough out there. Look at Saeed.
Right, exactly. Look at Paul. Look at the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
Look at Jesus. Look at Peter. We are on the leading edge of trying to make sure that America retains as much religious liberty as it possibly can. But truth is, we're still a safe haven in the world for Christians compared to so many other places. I mean, look at what's happening to Coptic Christians in Egypt right now under a Muslim Brotherhood-led government. I mean, 9-year-old boys are being imprisoned for allegedly blaspheming the Quran. I mean, that's the kind of world that other Christians live in. So I get it. We have to do the best we possibly can to make sure the situation in America does not get worse, and to make it better if we possibly can. However, we also need to maintain perspective, and I think in maintaining perspective, it will help our own courage, help our own sense of conviction that, you know what, trying to take on a school board or trying to take on a university dean is frankly not that big a deal, and in fact might be just the least we could do to advance the gospel. It's the least we could do. The most we can do is give our lives. The least we can do is not be intimidated by some dean of students somewhere.
The point you make is very valid in that, and one of the things we're concerned about is when we hear pastors and parents say, well, you just need to turn the other cheek. The thing that concerns us is if we do not enforce and exercise the religious liberty that is today guaranteed to us in the Constitution, if we don't enforce that right, we might lose it. And America is one of the countries in the United States where it is constitutionally guaranteed in our government that we have the right to practice this religion. So we need to enforce this religion. We need to enforce this right to practice our religion. And if we don't, we're in danger of losing it, I believe.
Well, that's right. And in fact, you know who agrees with you? The Congress of the United States of America enacted civil rights laws that give us the power to enforce and protect ourselves, enforce constitutional rights and our civil rights, and protect ourselves against state officials. And it even, in that, said, you know what, this is so important to us. We want to make sure that the people who do enforce their rights and do get protection against the state don't even have to pay their own attorney's fees, that the state will pay the attorney's fees if you win in a lawsuit against them. It's called Section 1983 and Section 1988. And these two sections, enacted by the United States Congress, represent a bipartisan consensus that our citizens should be empowered to protect our own Constitution. And we're empowered so much that if we win, the state pays our expenses. And so that is a clear message to each and every person in this country that we're part of the government. We are part and parcel. We're the core part of the government, in fact. And when you talk about the authorities in the United States of America, the ultimate authority is the American people. And the American people have the authority to even, for example, amend the Constitution. So this is a situation where it's not a feudal kingdom or an empire like Rome, where there's a king and the king bestows upon himself, or the emperor bestows upon himself all the rights, power, and authority. What we are is a government of the people and by the people, and when we as citizens abdicate the role that our own government has gladly given us, and it's a God-given right, so it didn't really come from the government, but our government has gladly acknowledged, when we abdicate our own role in protecting liberty, we are participating in our own country's decline. And that is intolerable.
Now, one of the things you just said is that the people, and we do, thank God, have the right to amend the Constitution. Now, when we say that we constitutionally have the right to practice our form of religion as we see fit, right now that's constitutionally guaranteed. One of the
Right.
reasons why we want to enforce that was that we also can change the Constitution. So if people with a bigger voice and are willing to stand up want to take that right away from us, they can. And that's something that's one of the major reasons we need to stand up and enforce it. If we don't use these rights and enforce them, we will lose them.
And it's also about educating. Why does it matter? Why is it important? You know, one of the things that's really interesting to me is in the United States, the secular left seems to believe that the biggest threat to liberty is Christianity, which is so 180 degrees opposite from the truth. Just ask any of the totalitarian regimes in this world. I mean, in Iran, they relentlessly persecute the house church. In Muslim Brotherhood Egypt, they relentlessly persecute Coptic Christians. In China, they relentlessly persecute the house churches. Why? Because the idea, the motivating ideas behind Christianity are an anathema to these unjust totalitarian regimes. And I would argue that one of the things that causes our secular left to rebel against Christians in their own country is, sadly, our secular left often has its own totalitarian streak in it, as you see on college campuses, where they continually gather greater power to themselves to exert over the hearts and minds of the students on those campuses. Now, I would never say they're as bad as places like Iran or China, of course, but they are not responsible stewards of the power that they have on these college campuses. They have an authoritarian streak that does not respect individual liberty, and they show that when they get power. And it's one of the reasons why Christianity often, I think, is an anathema to them, because Christianity walls off the human heart from the power of the state. And when the state gets truly ambitious, it doesn't want to just control your actions, it wants your heart.
Good point. When the phrase that you used a while back was cowboy up, and that we need to take courage and we need to enforce, we need to speak the truth in love. And that's one of the things we emphasize to the students that come and talk to us is, folks, let's love. We're not here to roll up our sleeves and go in and start this fist fight on a college campus, but we need to share we need to share the truth in love and make sure what we're saying is backed up by the Bible, but we can't just sit down and shut up. One of the things that I take a lot of, and I wish I could share their names, but they don't want me to share their names. However, there are students we've talked to that are willing to stand up, and they'll take a failing grade. They'll take a failing grade on a course and do it again to stand up for their faith. Now, as you mentioned, there are Christians that are standing up and giving their lives in other countries in defense of human freedom and in defense of religion. So we at least need to be able to stand up on a college campus and say, it's my right to have this Christian club here. It's my right to speak my mind. It's my right to write this paper against same-sex marriage and against abortion, because I'm expressing my view. And I'm really heartened when students will do that and take the hit on the grade or take the hit on the course and have the guts to stand up and do that. And that just makes me very appreciative of these young people.
Oh, yeah, well, absolutely. And, the emphasis you put on speaking the truth in love is the right emphasis. I was at an event some years ago, and the speaker, a good friend of mine, was talking about an opponent of his in a lawsuit who is one of the most radical people in American culture and politics, part of a very radical gay rights organization, very hostile to Christians, to Christianity. And he was talking about how in the course of their repeated battles with each other on college campuses around the country and debates and in courtrooms and things like that, they actually developed a friendship. And he was saying, and this affected me, it's affected me ever since he said that. He put a picture of the person up on a PowerPoint. He said, this person who has been my enemy in so many ways when it comes to the battle over our culture, I have to remember something through all the fights, that I am more like her than I am like Jesus. That I am a fallen and flawed individual. All of us are. And we owe everything, everything that's good in us, we owe to Christ. Everything that is good in us, we owe to Christ. So, like Paul said, you boast in nothing but Christ and Him crucified. And when we have nothing to boast in other than Christ and Him crucified, when leading with love, you lead with humility. Quite literally, there but for the grace of God, the saving grace of God, go I in my own destiny, in my own life. And so I think that humility and love is absolutely key. And what's really interesting to me is the number of persecuted Christians that I have met over the years, and especially in recent years as we've done more and more work for the persecuted church around the world. The number of persecuted Christians who demonstrate love for their persecutors that is difficult for us to comprehend is amazing. And so we cannot be embittered against people, but we also have to show resolve and courage and can't be intimidated by people.
Very good point. ACLJ, American Center for Law and Justice. And David, thank you for talking to us today. How do people get in touch with ACLJ, your website? They want to keep in touch with what's going on, maybe pray for Saeed. Speaking of Saeed Abedini, there is a website. I believe it's savesaeed.org.
Savesaeed.org, and Saeed is spelled S-A-E-E-D. And we've already gathered almost 420,000 petition signatures. And in fact, just last week, our legal team was at UN meetings in Geneva arguing on his behalf. We're going to be staying engaged at the UN and here at home. And I would encourage you to go there. It's amazing the number of people who have come out to support Saeed, from 117 members of Congress, the White House, the State Department, Sarah Palin, a number of Christian musicians and country musicians. It's really amazing. It's one of the first, pop culture, political culture, religious culture, common causes I've ever seen. And it's for just the right kind of person, a humble man of God who's shown courage beyond what we can comprehend. And to reach ACLJ, it's super easy. ACLJ.org. You can contact us there. You can. We keep everyone continually updated on our activities. So ACLJ.org.
ACLJ.org. David French, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and keep up the good work, and we'll pray for you. But folks, we as Christians speak the truth in love, but speak the truth. And we simply, the Great Commission is go out and make disciples of all nations. How can we make disciples of all nations if we're told to sit down and shut up, and we sit down and shut up? That's not going to do it.
Right.
It's just not going to do it. So I believe that we're coming into a time when we as Christians are going to find out what our mettle is, where we're putting our faith in. And are we more concerned about the comfort level and the acceptance level of the people around us, or are we more concerned about what's pleasing to God? And what's pleasing to God is sharing the truth in love, sharing the gospel, and not being afraid of what it's going to do to us from a reputation standpoint. Look at the disciples. They gave their lives. Look at the framers of the Constitution of the United States when they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and everything to birth this country. And look what we have because of what they did. We as Christians may be called to give that kind of sacrifice. We have to stand up. If we're going to take the Great Commission to heart, and when Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, we have got to stand up and speak the truth in love. And if you're concerned about not being able to do that, just pray about it. Read God's Word. And look at situations like Save Saeed, which I draw a tremendous amount of strength from and encouragement. And I'm just, my fiance and I pray for him daily. But we need to speak up, and don't just sit down and shut up. Listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to the Word of God, and pray for opportunities. And if you don't know what to say, pray that God gives you the words to say. Jesus Christ said, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. If the Holy Spirit would put words in the mouths of the disciples, why wouldn't He put words in your mouth to give you the right words to say in situations? I've been in that situation myself. I'm sure David has, where we didn't know what to say, and we just prayed about it, and God gave us the words to say. He'll do the same thing in your life. David, is there something you'd like to close with?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I can't really add too much to that. Thank you.
David French, ACLJ, American Center for Law and Justice, thank you for being with us today. This is TJN, the Jesus Network. It is time all together as the body of Christ to change the planet.